Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Namaskar. Back to you, Engineer Suraj Singh on this day, speaking from Bharat on this day, August 11, 2021. My last video was interrupted after 1 hour, so I'm continuing that one. I was talking about material safety, SHE, which is, you can say, it was. I talked of delivery, handling, and storage timber. That is timber. We describe as timber is. There's a table here that lists good practices in deliver, handling, and storage of timber on site. For handling, and these are major issues we are talking about. Delivery, it says quality of timber delivered should be similar to that of approved sample to confirm country of origin of timber delivered by verifying shipping documents furnished by supplier. Timber delivered should have a moisture content of 10 to 14% for use in an air conditioned building and 40 to 15% for non air conditioned building. Moisture content of timber should be measured with, for example, protimeter. Protimeter. This is probably protimeter is shown here. That is to measure moisture content of timber. Dimensional variations is defined. Width can be plus minus 0.75 mm, means very small tolerance, 0.75 mm, and thickness is plus. Some knots, you can see these are knots, spongy or brittle hard, and timber with sap should not be allowed. Temporary knots not allowed. For plywood type and thickness of plywood should be verified. Then we go to handling. Should be unloaded in good weather. It should be unloaded in good weather. Never transport or unload timber flooring in rain. Rain is bad weather for timber handling. Where possible, timber should be delivered directly to rooms where it shall be installed. Storage. Timber should be stored in an enclosed building space that is well ventilated. Storage area should be clean and dry. Clean and dry. Timber should be stacked on pallet to maintain its flatness. It should be flat means flat. There should be adequate room space for good air circulation around stacks of timber. For kiln dried timber, packaging of timber should only be removed before installation. For air dried timber, if site conditions allow, remove packaging of timber in environment where it will be installed to allow for proper acclimation of timber for at least 2 weeks. What it says, for air dried timber, if site conditions allow, remove packaging of timber in environment where it will be installed to allow for proper acclimation of timber for at least 2 weeks. Adhesives and finishing coats. Now it says adhesive and finishing coats, it is for delivery of adhesives and finishing coats. It says Adhesives and finishing coats should be delivered in original containers. Seals and labels should be kept intact until time of use. Storage area should be clean and dry to maintain temperature range within appropriate levels recommended by manufacturer. Adhesives and finishing coats should be prevented from damage or contamination by water moisture excessive heat or foreign materials. This is what about you can say. Now we go to handling. This is code of practice for safe handling of timber. Safe handling of timber, preservatives and treated timber. This code of practice may be cited as code of practice for safe handling of timber, preservatives and treated timber. It's 1991, very old. Object of this code of practice is to adopt National Code of Guidance, note and thereby provide practical guidance to employers, self-employed persons and employees to ensure health and safety of workers handling timber preservatives and timber treated with preservatives. Code of practice commences in number 91. This code of practice approved by Industry Code of Practice pursuant to Section 44A of Occupational Health and Safety Act 1983 by Minister for Industrial Relations and Minister for Further Education, Training and Employment on recommendation of Work Cover Authority. In this code of practice, guidance notes and national code. Guidance note means guidance note that was published in July 89 under title Guidance Note for Safe Handling of Timber Preservatives and Treated Timber, prepared by National Occupational Health and Safety Commission, WorkSafe, Australia. Okay, national code means code of practice that was published in July 89 under title National Code of Practice for Safe Handling of Timber Preservatives and Treated Timber, being a code of practice subject of declaration by National Occupational Health and Safety Commission, WorkSafe Australia, under Section 38(1) of National Occupational Health and Safety Commission Act 1985 of Commonwealth. Application of code of practice. Code of practice applies to all places of work other than mines within meaning of Coal Mines Regulation Act 1982 or Mine Inspection Act. Adoption of National Code and Guidance. National Code and Guidance of note have effect as if they form part of this code. Objective is an instruction to ensure health and safety of workers handling timber preservatives and timber treated preservatives and to provide guidelines for persons working within timber preservatives industry by specifying safe working practices and employee responsibilities. Consultation and cooperation between all relevant parties and full exchange of information pertaining to health and safety are essential to effective implementation of this code of practice. Substitutes are to be environmentally and occupationally safe chemicals and procedures for using them, while less toxic alternatives should be used wherever realistic and practicable in terms of efficacy and social consequences. These substitutes should be thoroughly evaluated for potential hazard before introduction to industry scope. Timber preservatives and timber treated with them may be encountered in various occupations. For example, power and telecommunication linesmen and associated classifications, workers in timber preserving industry, building workers, agriculture workers, municipal workers, gardeners, pest control workers, storesmen, drivers, railway and factory workers, and treatment plant operators. Some timber preservatives and treated timber are also freely available to general public. This code of practice covers timber preservatives used in Australia. Doesn't cover current use can be grouped as follows. Waterborne preservatives, for example, copper, chrome, arsenic. Waterborne preservatives, for example, copper, chrome, arsenic, boron compounds, and sodium fluoride. Oil type or oil-borne preservatives, for example, creosote. Light organic solvent preservatives, for example, solutions containing pentachlorophenol. Pentachlorophenol, light organic solvent. Copper, naphtha, copper naphthenate, and tributyltin oxide. This code of practice doesn't cover working practices applicable to manufacture of timber preservatives. Inclusion of whatever timber preservative code of practice doesn't necessarily indicate any recommendation for its use. Guidance note. Guidance note gives detailed information on characteristics and use of individual timber preservatives. First aid procedures, health hazards of preservative chemicals, and medical monitoring for guidance of medical practitioners. Employer responsibility. General. Employers have a responsibility to provide and maintain, so far as is reasonably practicable, safe and healthy working environments and work practices in which risk to health arising from working with timber preservatives and treated timber are minimized. In addition to complying with legal requirements, measures for achieving these objectives may include setting out in writing, in readily understood language, policy and arrangement to reduce to minimum health hazards of timber preservatives and to bring this to notice of employees, giving necessary instructions and training before commencing work and at regular intervals thereafter, providing adequate supervision of work practices and of application of health and safety measures to protect workers from health hazards of timber preservatives, providing adequate personal protective clothing and equipment which are necessary when exposure to timber preservatives cannot be otherwise prevented or controlled, ensuring that adequate first aid facilities are available at workplace for emergency treatment, and notifying local medical treatment centers of nature of preservatives used in plant, providing a copy of this code of practice and arranging through these centers medical monitoring where required. Hazards control. Health hazards should be minimized primarily by reducing and controlling hazards at their source. These measures may include as health hazards should be minimized primarily by reducing and controlling hazards at their source. These measures may include, but are not limited to or confined to, substitution of toxic materials by least toxic alternatives, engineering controls such as containment of processes involving timber treatment, selection of treatment processing that minimize and ultimately eliminate exposure of workers handling treated products, provision of adequate and approved drainage to remove excess preservative, use of mechanical ventilation to remove vapors and dust at their sources, ensuring that contaminated protective clothing is not reused and is laundered at an appropriate facility. So that's the points. I read again. Substitution, health hazards are not confined, but substitution of toxic metals by at least toxic alternatives, they do that. Measures these are include, not limited to, confined to. One is substitution of toxic metals with less toxic alternatives, engineering controls such as containment of process involving timber treatment, and selection of treatment process that minimize and ultimately eliminate exposure of workers handling treated products, provision of adequate and approved drainage to remove excess preservatives, use of mechanical ventilation to remove vapors and dust at their sources, and ensuring that contaminated protective clothing is not reused and is laundered at an appropriate facility. Personal protection. Respiratory protective equipment. Respiratory protective equipment should be made available where atmospheric concentrations of whatever chemical exceed or are likely to exceed 50% of exposure standard. All protective clothing and equipment should conform to relevant Australian standards or whatever standards. Training should be provided in use and maintenance of such equipment, which should only be used where there is no other practical method or as a short-term solution. Compliance with legislation. Employer is required to be aware of whatever relevant Commonwealth, state or territory legislation relating to occupational health and safety, pesticides, poisons, regulations of pressure vessels, environmental protection and transportation of dangerous goods. Relevant legislation should be made available to employees and their representatives and to health and safety committees. Branding and provisions of information. Compliance with legislation where applicable is required. Where no such legislation exists, Australian standards AS1604 and AS1608 should be complied with in respect to branding of commercially treated timber. Suppliers of preservatives should prepare material safety data sheet on their products. Suppliers of preservatives should prepare material safety data sheets on their products in conformity with the standard contents and format developed by National Occupational Health and Safety Commission 3. These shall be made available routinely to all purchasers. Purchasers shall in turn make these accessible to those handling preservatives. Employers should compile a register of products used on their premises and give access to this register all employees and their representatives. Suppliers of treated timber should also prepare an information sheet on their products and make these available to users and employees on request. Employers using treated timber should compile a register of classes of treated products on their premises or in their operations and give all employees and their representative access to a register. Training and retraining. It's important for management organization to focus on aspects related to safety for sake of both new employees and staff. New employees should receive appropriate training in occupational safety and health as part of their usual induction training. I repeat, it is important for management organization to focus on aspects related to safety for sake of both new employees and other staff. New employees should receive appropriate training in occupational safety and health as part of their usual induction training. Health and safety induction and retraining should specify objectives of training, including first aid and level of proficiency expected, outline occupational health and safety health policy, outline occupational safety and health policy, highlight potential hazards existing in workplace, make new employees aware of appropriate handling and emergency procedures for various chemicals used, emphasize facilities such as location of safety ensures and first aid stations. you can say make new employees aware of appropriate handling and emergency procedures for various chemicals used, emphasize facilities such as location of safety showers and first aid stations, stress safety aspects such as care and use of protective equipment and nature of chemicals involved, provide instructions on provisions contained with Commonwealth, state and territorial legislation. Safe working practices should be reinforced by periodic training as appropriate. Employees' responsibility. Employees have a responsibility in course of performing their work to take reasonable care for their own safety and that of other persons, though who may be affected by their acts or omissions. Cooperate with their employer to ensure that provisions of this code of practice are followed. Comply with instructional procedure for their own safety and health and those of others, and report immediately to their supervisor, health and safety representative, and committee any situation, whatever situation that they had reason to believe could present a risk and which they cannot themselves correct. Employees have a responsibility to comply with relevant provisions of Commonwealth, state and territorial legislation, be familiar with information contained on labels of all preservative chemicals they use and wear protective equipment whether necessary and ensure that it's correctly selected and fitted. Safe handling procedure. Safe handling procedure. Meanwhile, Safe handling procedures, general precautions. Skin contact is most likely route for preserving absorption and skin contact is most likely route for preservative absorption, and as such skin contact with treatment solutions including wet residue on treated timber should be avoided. Hold on. Skin contact is most likely route for preservative absorption, and as such skin contact with treatment solution including wet residue on treated timber should be avoided. Inhalation of sprays, mists or dust. Inhalation of sprays, mists or dust should also be avoided. While handling preservative chemicals, employees shall not smoke, eat, drink or use toilet facilities. Before engaging in these activities, hands and exposed skin should be washed. Hands and exposed skin should be washed before using, you can say, before smoking, before eating, before drinking, or before using toilet facilities. You have to wash your hands and exposed skin. Specific precautions, handling preservative. Specific requirements for safe use of individual chemicals should be read in conjunction with this chapter. Whatever instructions contained on label or material safety data sheet shall be followed. Gloves used should be impervious to preservative chemicals being used and conform to standards, whatever, Australian or otherwise. Respiratory protective equipment should comply with standards. Manual application, this was handling preservative, now manual application. By brushing, deluging or dripping. By brushing, deluging or dripping. Protective clothing with long sleeves, full leg coverage, long sleeves and full leg coverage. Impervious boots and gauntlet gloves essential. Respiratory equipment shall be worn where exposure standards are exceeded. Respiratory equipment shall be worn where exposure standards are exceeded. Now by spraying, this was by brush, by deluging, by dipping, and now by spraying. Manual application by spraying is not to be conducted in unventilated areas or confined spaces. In well ventilated areas, following protective equipment is required. Hooded coverall, that is, hooded coveralls treated so as to be solvent or water repellent. Hooded coveralls fastened at neck, ankles and wrists. Fastened at neck, ankles and wrists. Full length trousers, PVC apron, impervious boots, chemical face shields or goggles, gauntlet gloves and respiratory equipment. That is for spraying. So there are two ways. One is for brushing, deluging or dripping, which was protective clothing. with long sleeves, full leg coverage, impervious boots and gauntlet gloves. Respiratory equipment shall be worn where exposure standards are exceeded. And spraying, manual application by spraying is not to be conducted in unventilated areas or confined spaces. In well ventilated areas, following protective equipment is required: is hooded coveralls treated so as to be solvent or water repellent, fastened at neck, ankles and wrists. Full length trousers, PVC apron, impervious boots, chemical face shield or goggles, gauntlet, gloves and respiratory equipment. Remote application by pressure impregnation. Remote application by pressure impregnation, mechanical dipping or spraying. Precautions when handling water-borne preservative. During normal plant operation, coveralls and impervious boots shall be worn. When mixing liquid concentrates, additional requirements are: fasten coveralls at wrists, ankles and neck, PVC apron, gauntlet gloves, face shield or goggles, respiratory protection and head covering as required by label instructions for particular chemical. When mixing dry chemicals, all above plus a particulate respirator and chemical particulate respirator according to Australian standard Class M for toxic dust and Class H for arsenicals. Class M for toxic dust and Class H for arsenicals, and chemical goggles if eye protection is not incorporated into respirator. Precautions when handling creosote. During normal plant operation, coveralls and impervious boots shall be worn. During cylinder door opening operation, a respirator with organic vapor cartridge, suitable eye protection and gauntlet gloves shall also be worn. Precautions when handling other oil-borne preservatives. Precautions as for creosote. Precautions when handling light organic solvent preservatives. Precautions as for creosote. Handling and transportation of treated timber. After treatment, preservatives dry at different rates. Consequently, handling practices shall vary according to preservative used and are virtually independent of application method. Water-borne preservatives. Where treated timber is wet with preservative solution, water repellent coveralls, head covering, impervious boots and PVC gauntlet gloves shall be worn. Provided treated timber is surface dry, there are no additional requirements except that wearing of leather or cotton gloves recommended. Otherwise, wet where treated timber is wet and preservative solution, water repellent coveralls, head covering, impervious boots and PVC gauntlet gloves shall be worn. Creosote. When a period of 3 months from treatment, it is recommended that creosote treated timber be mechanically handled. Where close contact is essential, immediately following treatment or following protective clothing is required. Hooded coveralls fastened at neck, ankle and wrists, goggles, gauntlet gloves, impervious boots, and a respirator with two cartridges. Combined dust organic vapor cartridge. Where close contact is necessary, beyond 3 months holding period, following protective clothing is required: full length coveralls, impervious boots, and gauntlet gloves. Exposed skin should be protected from sunlight with an ultraviolet blockout preparation. Other oil-borne preservatives precautions are as for creosote, except that there is no requirement for ultraviolet cream. Precautions are as for creosote, except that there is no requirement for ultraviolet cream. So other oil-borne preservatives. For light organic solvent preservatives, precautions are as for water-borne preservatives, except that coveralls need be water repellent. Working with treated timber, water-borne preservatives. Where working with treated timber, so water-borne preservatives. We are working with timber treated. Where working with timber treated with water-borne preservatives produces dust, local exhaust ventilation should be provided. Where working with timber treated with water-borne preservatives produces whatever dust, local exhaust ventilation should be provided to remove it at source. If such measures are impracticable, employees should be provided with dust masks or respirators as appropriate, and work should be carried out in an area well separated from other employees. Substantial amounts of dust should be cleaned up and not be left to accumulate. Organic preservatives. Sawing timber treated with organic preservatives. Sawing timber treated with organic preservatives creates heat at cutting phase and vapor is produced. Greater concentrations of vapor are produced with use of power tools. Exposure of skin to and inhalation of both vapor and contaminated timber dust may occur. Accordingly, local exhaust ventilation should be provided to remove dust and vapors at source. If such measures are impracticable, amounts of dust should be cleaned up and not be left to accumulate. Personal hygiene. Before eating, drinking, smoking, or using toilet facilities, persons handling treatment fluids or treated timber should thoroughly wash exposed areas such as hands and face with soap and water. Action should be taken to avoid inhalation of dust and vapor at all times. At end of job, following cleanup procedures should be observed. First wash gloves and remove. Then remove goggles and wash. Then remove other protective clothing. Finally, remove respirator. If using cartridge type respirator, cartridges should be removed and discarded. If respirator is disposable, it should be discarded. If respirator is reusable, it should be thoroughly cleaned after use per manufacturer's directions. Contaminated protective clothing shall not be worn and should be laundered by employer at an appropriate laundry after each day's work. Contaminated clothing should be placed in an appropriately labeled polyethylene bag and should not be laundered with other clothing. Storage of chemicals. Treatment solutions should be stored in containers suitable to prevent escape of vapor and spillage, leakage of liquid. Organic preservatives should be stored in well-ventilated area. Storage should be well away from foodstuffs, food containers, and food preparation and consumption areas. Separate lockable storage shall be provided for chemicals that require restricted access. Records must be kept of all chemicals entering and leaving store. Liquid chemicals should be stored within a non-permeable bonded area and capable of containing at least 120% of total volume of chemical stored. Transfer of concentrates from original to subsequent container. Transfer of concentrates from original to subsequent containers other than for direct use is discouraged, but if transfers are made, new containers shall be appropriately labeled. Containers shall be disposed of in accordance with requirements of appropriate authorities and relevant legislation. It says transfer of concentrates from original to subsequent containers other than for direct uses is discouraged, but if transfers are made, new containers shall be appropriately labeled. Containers shall be disposed of in accordance with requirements of appropriate authorities and relevant legislation. Location and design of store. Location and design of store should take into account risks of fire and explosion. Local fire authorities shall be notified of presence of all chemicals and solvent carriers in store. Chemicals should be stored so that decontamination of spills can be facilitated. Emergency clothing, respirators, showers, eye wash fountains shall be available. Emergency and first aid instructions shall be posted in a prominent place together with names, address and telephone numbers of persons to contact. Wherever practicable, a telephone should be installed. Storage of timber following treatment. Storage of timber following treatment. Freshly treated timber should be stored in a well-ventilated area in such a manner as to prevent contamination of other materials with treatment fluid. Such timber shall be stored over an approved drainage and collection area. Such timber shall be stored over an approved drainage and collection area for sufficient time to permit drainage and surface drying. Freshly treated timber should be stored in well ventilated area in such a manner as to prevent contamination of other materials with treatment fluid. Such timber shall be stored over an approved drainage and collection area for sufficient time to permit drainage and surface drying. Disposal of treated timber. Treated timber shall be disposed of in accordance with appropriate legislation. It is recommended that treated timber to be discarded should be buried in suitable location. For example, away from underground water courses and rivers. Burning treated timber is not recommended since various harmful decomposition products may be released. However, if burning is impracticable, or if burning is impracticable, timber may be burnt provided it's burnt in an open area or a suitable incinerator and ashes buried. Persons standing open air burning operations should be supplied with appropriate protection including respirator. Treated timber should not be burnt in cooking or heating fire or in confined or ventilated space. Spillages. All spillages should be contained and appropriate protective equipment be worn during whatever cleaning operation to minimize exposure. Small spillages of treatment solutions onto soil should be covered with at least 25 mm of soil. Spillages elsewhere should be soaked up onto paper, vermiculite rags or sawdust, and for copper chrome, small spillages of treatment. Small spillages and treatment solutions onto soil should be covered with at least 25 mm of soil. Spillages elsewhere should be soaked up onto paper, vermiculite rags or sawdust, and for copper chrome, cement or lime, and buried. Final cleaning should be made by absorbing onto dry sand or earth, or in case of creosote, with kerosene or mineral turpentine, with subsequent burial of contaminated material. Procedures for handling large-scale spills larger than 50 liters should be developed in consultation with manufacturer, responsible environmental protection authority, water waste disposal authority, local government authority, or emergency services. This was fine. I think I saved it, I don't remember, so let me see if I saved it. Material handling, timber safe handling. Okay, material handling I have to write here. Material handling is already there, it's okay. Yes, it's okay, so I can save it and save it. So we go now to our previous one, and that is hazards control, where we studied about timber. Here it was hazards for hazards for handling of timber, which are very small. Now we read again so that we get clear what we talked and what is fact. What is talked and what is fact. That's the point here that we have to think of. Personnel to wear suitable gloves, footwear when handling timber products. Timber to be denailed in order to prevent penetration into feet or other parts of body by overlooking by someone. Timber shall be stored in designated areas away from offices and other buildings. Good standards of housekeeping shall be maintained to prevent slips, trips, and falls. Sawn wood chips and sawdust pools. Sawn wood chips and sawdust pools must be removed in a timely manner to prevent accumulation of fire hazards. Circular saws, circular electric saw do not feel tired or endangered. Industrial electrical fitting should be used for connection to electric saw. Fabrication should be numbered accordingly. Fabrication should be numbered accordingly. After one job is complete, which should be then be placed at one corner for shifting to site location. All jobs so finished shall be placed within carpentry yard or shop or on-site areas designated as such, so that no circulation of other site workers as well as working carpenters injuries and also to save working time. Industrial electrical fitting should be used for connection to electric saw. And be placed at one corner for shifting to site location. All jobs so finished shall be placed within carpentry yard or shop or on site areas designated as such, so that circulation of other site workers as well as working carpenter is obstructed and makes site untidy. All jobs so finished shall be placed within the carpentry yard or shop or in site areas designated as such, so that no circulation of other site workers as well as working carpenters is obstructed and makes site. All pieces of sites so fabricated should be transferred to site using mechanical means to avoid injuries and also to save working time. Suggested not to crowd carpentry shop, but earliest installation of forms on site location is always better. Concrete pours. Concrete pours it's very important item, very important item. This is hazards, we can say manual handling, defective plant equipment, falling materials. let's say some structuralguide.com what it says. Let's see. Here is the guide. Concrete pouring steps and techniques. Nice sample, local, no problem. Just for information, I'm showing you this. These are certain activities which we all know, that preparation, forming, setting out and leveling concrete pours, machine curing. Preparation. We have to do preparatory work, we all know. For concrete, to do preparatory work before starting form work as final stage. Part of work of stage 1 should be done in preparation. Proceed with work. At initial stage, beam bottom, place, start with reinforced work. ठीक है यार, concretebook.com. Let's see this. I'll take only this one. How to pour concrete from preparation work to curing. This is 20 here. Installing concrete is a challenging job. Installing concrete is a challenging job, it says. says installing concrete is a challenging job and every concrete pour is different. Size, shape, color, finish, and complexity of a project all have to be considered when pouring concrete. Use this guide of 8 steps. Okay, here this guide. Installing concrete is a challenging job and every concrete pour is different. Size, shape, color, finish, and complexity of project all have to be considered when pouring concrete. Use this before concrete can be poured. Site needs to be prepared to reduce chance of heaving from expensive soils and frost. On small projects, use hand tools to clear area of all grass, rocks, trees, shrubs, and old concrete. Exposing bare earth. Earth moving equipment speeds up process, especially for large pours. Earth moving equipment speeds up process, especially for large pours. When placed and compact a sub-base of fill gravel. Unless soil is very compact and stable, alright. So we say on small projects use hand tools to clear area of all grass, rock, trees, shrubs and old concrete, exposing bare earth. Earth moving equipment speed up process, especially for large pours. Then place and compact sub-base. Then we go forming. Once sub-base is prepared, forms can be set. For residential concrete projects, use wood forms with metal or wood stakes. Attach forms to stakes. For residential concrete projects, use wood forms with metal or wood stakes. Attach forms to stakes with screws or special nails to allow for easy removal after concrete was secured. Forms should be in good condition. Be set to provide proper slope or grade for drainage and from grain. Once subbase is prepared, forms can be set for residential concrete projects. Use wood forms with metal or wood stakes. Attach forms to stacks with screws and special nails to allow for easy removal after concrete is cured. Form should be in good condition, be set to provide proper slope or grade for drainage, and form cleaners where where they make each other or other structures. Now you can see the mixer here, mixing. So this is mixer. If using bagged concrete purchased at home center, mix concrete with water according to package instructions. For small slabs, you can use a wheelbarrow and shovel, but renting a concrete mixer can make process easier. If you concrete arrives in a ready mix truck and drum on the back of truck. Then we can say for small slabs you can use a wheelbarrow and shovel, but renting a concrete mixer can make process easier. If your concrete arrives in the ready mix truck, drum of back of truck should be spinning to keep concrete from settling and getting hard. Shoot from pour wet concrete into forms until they are full to top edge. While wet concrete is being poured, use shovels, racks, and come along special concrete rakes to to move concrete to make sure that there are no voids or epochs. Pour wet concrete into forms until they are full to top. While wet concrete is being poured, use shovels, rakes, and come along special concrete rake to move concrete to make sure there are no voids or pockets. Use Use a large metal or wood board to scrape top of concrete. Screeding helps compact and consolidate concrete and begins smoothing and leveling process. Next, use a float to further compact concrete, even out whatever height or low areas. Use a large metal or wood board to scrape top of concrete. Screeding helps compact and consolidate concrete and begins smoothing and leveling process. What to do then? Says use a large metal or wood board to screed top of concrete. Screeding helps compact and consolidate concrete. Begins the smoothing and leveling process. Next, use a float to further compact concrete. Even out whatever height or low areas and create a smooth finish. Small handheld floats are good for edges and detail work. Large bull floats are best for working large areas. At same time, work control joints and edges into concrete with special hand tools. If concrete receives a rough broom finish, if concrete receives a rough broom finish, no additional finishing may be required. If concrete be smooth toweled or stamped, a steel towel finish is needed. Let concrete rest until surface begins to form up. Once formed, use a steel towel to create a smooth, hard and uniform finish. Steel toweling can be done by scatting across surface. You can say let concrete rest until surface begins to form up. Once formed, steel towel to create a smooth, hard and uniform surface finish. Steel toweling can be done by scatting across surface on knee board, toweling small areas at a time or with towels or tools on, on long poles known as fresnos or funny towels. Then we have to steel's complete final finish can be applied to concrete. Most basic type of finish is known as broom finish. Special broom is pulled across concrete surface, creating a rough textured surface. Other types of finishes include stamped, textured, or smooth trowel, to name a few. Curing. Concrete can rest and begin to cure. Let's get hard. Curing process lasts 28 days with first 48 hours being most critical. Apply a liquid chemical, curing and sealing compound to help concrete cure slowly and evenly, which helps reduce cracks, curling and surface discoloration. You can start up to use your concrete for a light foot traffic. You can start to use your concrete for light foot traffic 3-4 days after placement, and you can drive and park your concrete 5 to 7 days after placement. Working with concrete pour company. Working with concrete pour company. If you need more than just a simple slab pour, get bids from professional concrete contractors. Compare these bids and make a choice based on referrals, experience, price, scheduling, and curb appeals. Once an installer is picked, price and logistics worked out. If you need more than just simple slab pour, you can get this. Then you can say once an installer is picked up, price and which is worked out, you should be presented with a contract. Contract needs clearly state work to be completed. Expectations on finish, color and texture, price, payment schedule and warranty to guarantee performance. Once you sign contract and pay deposit. Okay. Tips for good pour. Tips for good pour. No matter where you live, minimum cement content for whatever residential concrete should be in lives it is per yard of concrete, and it should be can be in kilogram, which is 300 320 kilogram. If you live in freeze thaw climate, minimum 4% of air entering admixture should be used. That is, if you are in freezing climate. If you live in freeze thaw climate, minimum 4% air and trailing admixture should be used to help scaling and spalling. Small stone can be used as aggregate in concrete. It's going to be stamped versus regular 3/4 inch. No matter where you live, this is minimum contact. So if you live in freeze, 4% air retention is a must. Small stone can be used as aggregate in concrete. It's going to be stamped versus regular 3/4 inch stone for broom or smooth finish concrete slab. A concrete truck may be able to pull up to site and pour right into forms. If site is on other side of house or building, truck may pour into wheelbarrows or a concrete pump. Then a concrete truck may be able to pull us. Okay. Concrete should not be placed when temperature drops, 5 and 40. We know that. If concrete is placed in weather below this, use curing blankets. Concrete should not be placed when temperature drops below 5 degrees or 4 degrees Celsius or 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Colder temperature, longer it will take concrete to cure. If concrete is placed in weather below 40, use curing blanket to keep concrete warm during initial few days of curing process. How to keep your new concrete? Concrete is a durable product. If placed, finished and cured properly, should last a lifetime. While concrete is often used no maintenance product, considering following simple maintenance procedures to increase service life of your concrete. A good quality sealer is always a good sealer. A good quality seal is always a good idea. Apply a month after concrete. To keep your concrete looking its best. Sealing and regular maintenance will also minimize chances from staining and discoloration caused by natural or man-made contamination. Concrete has been around thousands of years and remains most popular choice for residential taking a contract to general maintenance will make entire process run smoother for all parties involved. All right, then say can say it's manual handling. Manual handling hazard, defective plant equipment is hazard, falling materials hazard. Control measures. During concrete placing to be operated by trained and authorized personnel under close supervision. To an extent feasible, concrete should be procured from an approved concrete mixing plant and transported to site using transit mixer. All plant and equipment shall carry current certification and be maintained in a safe condition. Defective plant equipment to be removed from service. Slinging and lifting operation to be carried out by trained personnel. Unauthorized personnel must be prohibited from entering areas where concrete placing activities are being undertaken or conducted. Access across rebar fixing shall be maintained. Manually. Workers in crew should not stand below concrete pump, boom, discharge outlet. Provide cold drinks and refreshments to all crew workers for long hour concrete pours to prevent dehydration. Allow rest pauses intermittently to crave growth. Suspended slab ports to ensure supports are intact. Requirement of traffic diversion should be conducted if necessary during day as well as during night hours. Transit mixers and concrete pumps may occupy road space temporarily, for which official permission as well as traffic diversion made with signaling persons flags when on duty throughout concrete operation remains ongoing. With official approval for cleaning transit mixers after concrete has been delivered to location on site. All such dumped concrete after it is dried should be removed to permanent dumping site, keeping in view environment controls. Adequate curing arrangements should be made post-pour using water hose up to required level by pumping or otherwise. Minimum manual handling of water for curing using bucket etc. should be conducted. When curing is conducted using curing compound, all precautions envisaged by compound manufacturers should be strictly adhered from safety viewpoint. When using certain defects observed post-concrete, whatever chemicals to be used for repairs shall be complied with manufacturer's instructions on applications method statements. Masks should be used while applying chemicals when certain repairs are required. When masks and gloves also for hand, when certain repairs are required by concrete surface, chipping adequate precautions should be taken by protection of eyes. Masks should be used while chipping or working in concrete areas that are still underwater cement reactions. When certain repairs, so there are 2 points here. When using certain defects observed post-concrete, whatever chemicals to be used for repairs shall be complied with manufacturer's instruction applications method statement. Masks should be used and gloves should be used while applying chemicals. When current repairs are required by concrete surface, chipping, adequate precautions should be resorted to by protection of eyes. Masks should be used while chipping or working in areas, concrete areas that are still underwater cement ratio. And close here today, better at this stage. So it's about today 2.5 hours total. I think hope safety is ongoing well and we have preservation about this, right?